Hello and welcome to Book Club. We are delighted to be joined today by the American author Heather LeFevre. It is said that it's no easy matter to give novelty to old subjects, authority to new, to give nature to everything and to arrange everything according to its nature. Yet this is exactly what Heather has done with her book Brain Surfing. Describing herself as the wide-eyed explorer, Heather travelled the world to interview 9 of our top marketing strategists. She lived in their houses, followed them to work, and asked them question after question about their craft. The way that Heather writes about people and places makes her more like a novelist than a business writer. Her descriptive powers are like the air in a balloon, lifting these 9 strategists above us so that we can see their work and their purpose clearly. Heather LeFevre, welcome to Book Club.
Hi, Lee. Thank you.
Now, welcome to our readers, my colleagues at Silence Media, Molly White and Natalie Farsiani, Jessica Geary from RAP, Dino Myers-Lamptey from The Barbershop, Rihanna Francis from Cara, and 3 of the strategists that Heather interviewed for Brain Surfing, Kevin May, Sahar Sidham, and Brian Miller. But finally, welcome to those of you who are watching us live online. Heather is also looking forward to hearing your questions. Heather, sometimes in life we do things because we want to do, and we work out why we did them later. Have you worked out why you wrote Brain Surfing?
I think so. I think I needed to understand myself, and I was really insecure about feeling that I was good as a strategist, and I needed to go through a sort of gauntlet to feel like I could continue, that there was a place for me.
And of course, you're pleased that you did.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I mean, I think that life is a lot easier with mentors, for sure.
Okay, great. Well, that is a good time to ask Molly to ask her first question, which is about female mentors.
Yeah. Hi, Heather.
Hi, Molly.
So in your chapter with Suzanne Powers, you discussed how sort of fewer women volunteered as mentors. So I guess my question is, what response has Brain Surfing and that chapter in particular received from women, and whether any more have come forward to volunteer since?
No one has called. I think one thing I learned from doing this is that I am different. Like, one thing my parents told me is when I was a kid, I would just go up to people and say, ask them what they were eating and why. And, so I've just not had that much of, social anxiety. And now that I see no one in the oncoming years ask if they can stay at my house, it's like, okay, maybe that was a weird thing that I did. So no. But also, I mean, even when I did this, the percentage of women farther along than me on the journey was small. And so I think that that's, it's hugely representative in the number of women that were in the book.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Heather. Brian, your first question is also about mentors.
Yeah, I'd be interested, Heather, now that a few years have passed, what, with the sort of distance of time, do you find are the things that you've that you learned that you have actually put to work in your life and work that have made a difference?
I think that I sort of realized that there's like this myth of the perfect strategist planner. And I think I realized that no one person can do it all. And by seeing you all finding your own way and, being confident in what you like to do and what you were good at, and being able to, you're good at lots of things, and you're able to, focus on the thing that you're going to pursue. And I think that has helped me to see that I needed to find that thing. So, I mean, I think I have just kept searching for my thing, but I at least know that it's possible by seeing you all chart your own course.
Brian, quite like to ask you actually, has your career changed as a result of being in Heather's book?
Well, I think one of the I mean, Heather and I have kept in touch, and I think, one of the things that I really learned was, Heather has many superpowers, and one of them is sort of drawing on such a sort of wide and eclectic group of people for, sort of help and inspiration. And I think that, one of the things that, I sometimes have a tendency to do is to kind of a problem and sort of treat it as schoolwork and kind of go, I must find an answer, rather than, and I think one of the things being around Heather was the sort of realization of thinking, who do I know who could do this in 5 minutes? And so I think that that's something that I've really, sort of admired about Heather and try and channel.
Thank you. Dino, you've got a question for Heather about the speed of change.
Yes. Hi, Heather. So it's been nearly 5 years since the book was published, and I remember reading it when it came out, and then in reading it again, just to come back to the book club, it was surprising how much stuff is so still very relevant, and it feels like it was written yesterday. How fast, or rather, have things moved as fast as you thought they would do?
I think it goes back to that quote, the future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And like you said, I agree with you. I think a lot of these points are totally relevant because nobody's doing anything with a lot of the information that we have. And I was able to spot some of the people who were on that, edge of the adjacent possible. So they were already ahead of the curve. And yeah, and it does feel frustrating to have seen a lot of these things ahead of time and to not see them come to fruition. Yeah. Thanks for reading the book twice.
I know. It was good fun.
I say one for each eyeball, but like
Yes, I'm going to ask you to put your question to Heather now. It's about being the party guest of the year.
Yes. Hi, Heather. Thank you for the book. I've got it here. I absolutely devoured it. I've got some SWOT notes as well. But as you mentioned, you say that brands are too busy being drunk at the party and talking about themselves. And I think we can all name a couple of drunken brands that we know and have worked on in the past. In your opinion, what does it take to be the generous, funny host as a brand?
One slide that I put up frequently now is that brands want to notice people, which is superficial and fleeting, but people want to be seen, which is deep and profound. And it's like the conversation that we can have until 2 o'clock in the morning. So I think that's the difference, is like, can you really see a person rather than just noticing them and thinking about them as adding to your bottom line?
Now, Nat, you have a question about the tale of two robots.
Yeah, I do. Hi, Heather.
Hi.
When you refer to the tale of two robots and the need to be more reactive to our environment, how do you get clients that prefer maybe a more traditional way of working to try more abstract methods?
I think you have to choose your clients wisely. So I think there's a wide array of brands out there, and you can waste a lot of time and create a lot of ideas that never see the light of day at one end, and a lot of stuff can get made at the other. So I think we have to choose wisely where we invest our time and who gets our brain power, which is hard when there's high unemployment and other stuff going on. But
So, you've got a question for Heather about the book that she'd write today.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you, Heather, for the experience in the first round. I'm kind of curious, who are our replacements? Who, if you're writing the book today, who would you put in it?
Do you mean like in the marketing world, or where I would go?
But that's exactly
Yeah.
it. It could.
Yeah.
It's where else would you go now? Who else would you want to spend to do the same thing with?
So I think like that part of why I did it was because I needed you guys as friends. I needed to have friends in the business, not just people to look up to. Like, I just read that book, 98% Pure Potato. That's about the beginning of the strategy the account planning world. So Stanley Pollitt died at 49, right? Like, I didn't know that, you know? So I think I'm so interested in health now that I would want to stay with some of the people that I see that are teaching me how to not get burnt out, how to recover, how to, you know, maintain my body. Those are the things that I'm really interested in now. And I think our careers, I think you taught me this, our careers are experiments of, you know, self-expression. And maybe we're just in this planner part for a while, but it stays with us.
Thanks.
Sure.
So what was it like for you being in the book? How did that influence or change your career?
I think the lovely thing about Heather is that she's wonderfully disarming, very easy to get on with, and not realize how advanced she actually is on so many levels. So I think the main thing that happened is that she challenged me to articulate some of the things I was thinking about and doing at the time, to the point that I actually had to live up to them. I actually had to go out and do them post the book. So all of the ideas that we were discussing in the book about making things and getting your hands dirty and stuff like that, it was almost like, you know, I was already right at the edge, and then Heather's book just pushed me over and made me embark on a new journey. So I think in many ways Heather is very generous with her commentary about the people in the book, but I think it's the other way around. Personally, I benefited massively because she made me say stuff that I actually had to go and do.
Okay. Now, Kevin, you were also in the book, and your question is about the mythical big idea.
Yeah. My memory of our time together, Heather, was we spent a lot of time talking about big ideas and how important they were, and a lot of how the serendipity that is behind how they come about. And so my question is, do you feel that the sort of march towards greater quantification and the instrumentalization of data that is very much prevalent in the way that people are working now, and particularly the work of strategy, do you think that is coming at the expense of big ideas?
I think it's coming at the expense of creativity to a large degree. So,
Kevin, do you want to explain the big idea? When you say the big idea, what do you really mean by that?
Well, what we think of in terms of ideas are breakthroughs which are not necessarily extrapolated in a linear fashion, but where different ideas are landed upon which are big enough to be transformational and aren't necessarily worked out, but are landed upon through a combination of approaches. And it's we talk in terms of things that aren't definitive. You know, an idea can never be presented as the only conceivable thing that can be done. The great ideas that you think about outside of the world of commercial communications, from the world of literature, from the world of theatre, from the world of film, these are all ways of encapsulating something that connects with our essential humanity, that allows us heuristically to get things in a way that we wouldn't, without having to go through the depths of explanation and you know, deductive argument. And the strongest, the reason why the advertising industry has always been disproportionately valuable to its clients is that he's been able to encapsulate in ideas things that short circuit the convincing of an audience towards a predisposition towards that brand. But it's once you start to try and break that down, it's you know, my mind goes to that quote about God, who was the guy? In any case, it doesn't matter. The notion that when you try to trying to analyze comedy is a bit like trying to dissect a frog. Nobody laughs and the frog dies. You know, it's that notion of something something gets landed upon you. You have to have the confidence to go with it as something that is huge and can transport people. And I think it's very difficult to quantify big ideas. Another phrase we use a lot is not everything that matters can be measured, and not everything that can be measured matters. And that's a battle within the world as we see it. We see it now, and I'm interested to see whether Heather, who I know has gone off in other directions since we were together writing the book, whether she's experienced that more in her life and in the things that she's seen.
Thanks, Kevin. I think that studying disinformation has helped me to get some words and language around this that I didn't have before. And one of the phrases that they use is called kinetic power. So that there's this possibility to have power, that it is that kind of power that isn't easily measurable. And I think that is what we create through serendipity. And it is a lot of understanding how does the unconscious work? How do we get at the stuff that we know but don't know or don't have words to?
Yeah.
Thank you, Heather. Rihanna, you've got a question for Heather about using informants.
Yes, hi Heather. During your time with Rob Campbell, he talks about kind of using informants for business. So I just wondered, what's kind of the best example that you think of using informants, whether it's an example of a time that you have or maybe someone else that you know, and how would you advise others to take that sort of approach?
I think that what Rob had done was so brilliant, and I've since gone and learned, like in ethnography, they use that term informant as well. So I think it is about doing more extreme ethnography, and that's a lot what I learned from Brian. I got to interview some hackers, so really like different perspectives, having something to bear on whatever it is that you're working on. Other than the hackers, what's something else that we've done? Well, and then like more recently, I've worked with like ultra high net worth targets and not really every time that I work on something, it opens my eyes to, oh, I didn't understand that category. I didn't know this type of people or whatever. And, in that case, and it's timely with what's going on in the world. Like the number of millionaires and billionaires has shot up in recent years. The number of private plane certifications has gone up 5x, and it's like, oh, okay, so it's like informants help remove the scales from your eyes, because it's like, why wouldn't you? It's kind of what Brian was saying earlier. It's like, why would you spend 2 weeks doing this if you could find somebody who knows the answer in 5 minutes? I think informants are cheat codes for what we do.
Thanks, Heather. We've got a few questions coming in now from our live audience. Before you do your reading from the book, Heather, I'm going to put a couple to you. So this one is from Duncan, from Cirencester. And he says this: your books come across as part travel blog, part business book. Did you find it difficult to meet both those objectives, and how well do you feel that you achieved them?
I could not be when you started talking about this, like, am I really a novelist pretending to be a planner, right? Like, I couldn't write just 10 ways to be a planner kind of book. It's not me. So I identify as a highly sensitive person. So like my nervous system takes in a lot, and to not share that with you would be to not have shared the way that I was experiencing this, fire hose of information. So did I succeed? It's for you guys to decide, but I was proud of what I put out.
I'm going to say that you did.
Okay.
And actually, one of the things that interests me is who are your favorite writers? Either your favorite travel writers or favorite novelists. I was intrigued to know who your influences are.
I think Mary Roach, I don't know if you've ever read anything by her. She's a science writer, and she wrote a book called, all her books are like one word, like stiff, where she writes and learns about how we use cadavers and how being, how dead people influence humanity. Gulp, it's all about swallowing. So I think her style of getting deep into a scientific thing that is complex, but then also, we learn through stories. Mm-hmm. So why wouldn't you try to teach others through stories?
Okay. Next question comes from Martin Doyle. Martin's in North London. And Heather, he says, what is your advice for those of us both looking for mentors and looking to mentor others? I don't think there is enough of this in our industry outside of the schemes for 21-year-old graduates.
Well, I personally am a fan of, going out and asking people. I know that there's thousands of people in this business and very few have the chutzpah to go up to somebody and say, I want to be where you are. I want to learn what you know. So be that person.
Okay. That's lovely advice. Now, Heather, you're going to do a reading for us.
Yes.
Are you ready?
I'm ready, sir. All right. So from the end, putting our ingenuity to good use. As I wrote and revised, Brian Miller took a course at the Faber Academy, an esteemed creative writing program in London, and began writing his first novel. We swapped writing techniques and inspirational essays by writers who have gone before us, and he prompted me to think deeply about the crux of this book as he read early drafts and offered feedback. The reader will want to know why somebody with a life that most people dream about, living in one of the world's coolest cities with an amazing job in an aspirational industry, whose apartment is listed on Foursquare as a karaoke bar, decides to question it in a really profound way and throw it all up in the air, and why she doesn't go to an ashram but heads out to talk to a bunch of advertising people. My response, dear reader, stems from my perhaps strange belief that life is a lot like performing a circus plate spinning act. For me, there are 3 plates: career, city, and love. And each plate has a question: what to do, where to live, who to love. Maybe you have a kids and health plate too, if you're a particularly ambitious plate spinner. You might be able to keep a couple of plates going at once, but more, that's quite a feat. So we make choices. We languish in a city we hate because of an amazing job or for the love of our life. Or alternatively, we turn down a work opportunity to stay in our city. Or we drop everything and follow love. I've never mastered spinning all the plates at once. Maybe I'm especially hard to please, restless even. I took on this project knowing I was completely open to a new city, a new job, and to love. I simply had the idea to apprentice myself, decided it was a good one, and went for it. But it was the commitment I made to write a book that took me on the greater adventure. Despite knowing intellectually that brands must be created for the long term, my living in a project-based world for so many years has created an imbalance in me toward short-term thinking. And while a book can be broken down into smaller tasks, it is a long-term integrated construction, unlike any brand work I've ever worked on. Both agency and client, in my experience, have a bias toward short-term results, and that's to our detriment.
Thank you. That was excellent. Brian, I'm going to ask you now to ask your second question to Heather.
Sure. Although, yeah, I think I just got preempted by one of the other ones, but I mean, which was because it was really about this idea of, should everybody go on a quest for a mentor and or more than one mentor? Can everybody benefit from it?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I have more than one person that I feel is a mentee to me, people that come to me that I want to support. And I've become I think you know this, I've become a crisis counselor in the past couple of years for the crisis text line. And just the way that they've taught us to support people without judgment. Every human needs that. Every human needs that. And we don't talk about that at work. We pretend like it's not true. We hear the word psychological safety, but then we don't figure out how to create it. And we just let it happen if it happens. So yes, go find the people who are doing the work to make this a good experience for people, and let's lose the rest.
Brian, there's a couple of things I wanted to ask you. First of all, have you had mentors in your career? And also, secondly, do you think that in in the United Kingdom, in the UK, we maybe are a little more reluctant to ask people to mentor us, where we might see our colleagues in the States be a bit more forthcoming about a relationship like that.
I mean, yes, yeah, I have, although they might, as you kind of say, be surprised to be named as mentors, really, in that, you know, sort of, I don't think I ever, you know, sort of officially said that. It was more just kind of, you know, people whose feet you enjoyed sort of sitting and just sort of absorbing. And you know, I guess I spent some time at Saatchi's very early in my career when Paul Arden was there, and sort of continued to know him afterwards. And you know, he was a you know, an extraordinary guy, with often whose advice was kind of not what you'd think at all. I think my favorite thing he said to me was, he said, "You know what this absolute secret of creative fulfillment is?" I was thinking kind of, oh, you know, what is it? And he said, "Minimize your mortgage." And it was sort of, and it was going, you know, get out of London, just go and live somewhere really cheap where, you know, you can just tell people to, you know, get lost. You know, he was, yeah, he would always come out with the unexpected. I unfortunately could never match his dress sense.
Thank you, Dino. Your next question. It's about traveling versus strategy.
Yeah, Heather, I'm interested to know, what did you find most interesting, traveling to the places that you travel to, or actually learning about strategy and marketing?
Dino, I think you know the answer to that. I think I've always been trying to strategize ways to get what I want out of my working experience. Like I said before, like the idea that your career is self-expression. So from very young, I was super interested in the world and wanting to get out into it and not sure how to make that happen. And yes, my career provided for some of that, but when I still wanted more, this was absolutely a scheme.
Dino, as a reader of the book, as somebody who has read it twice, which bit appealed to you most? Was it when Heather was writing about her travels, or writing about strategy? Did you have as a reader? Did you have one bit that you enjoyed more than another?
Well, I had the benefit, I think, of having been to some of the places that Heather was visiting. So I didn't have that kind of like necessarily the urge to just go to some of the places that were talked about, because I'd probably visited them before already. So it was quite nice to kind of like, you know, hear it from someone else's point of view. But yeah, I mean, I think that it was the people going into the businesses of how they did things, actually. And actually what's really interesting in terms of in 5 years since I read it first and then I've just read it is, you know, I started my own company last year. So actually it was interesting reading it with that lens on suddenly, where you're talking about, you know, different models, and certainly in terms of some of the concluding chapters talking about, you know, the future of strategy and the future of planning. And I'm going around setting about trying to design a model that kind of like works. And you read the book again, you're like, hang on a minute, this has probably inspired so much of what I'm doing right now, without even really relating it to the book. But you get reminded of that by going back second time round.
Yes, that's very interesting, because I'm not a strategist. I've worked with strategists, but actually, as a business owner, I've recommended this book to lots of other business owners, because I think there's so much in there for us to learn. So, you'd like to ask Heather about a new epilogue?
Yes, what would you put in the new epilogue if you were writing it today, Heather? What was your biggest reflection, things that you thought were going to happen, things that didn't happen, things that surprised you, that you thought, okay, in retrospect, I will add this bit of insight or this idea to what I've already written?
I think there's something about like our neurodiversity and our differences, and like how do we create this new of diverse perspectives. And you have to somehow transfer that knowledge from generation to generation down. And like, there's kind of like, everybody on this call is English, right? Like, there's sort of an anti-intellectualism thing going on over here, at least, and people not so interested in preserving or figuring out how this is done. And there's just like, everybody's a strategist now. So like, how do you really figure out who is a real strategist? It's not a profession. There's no, it's very difficult to figure out if a person can actually do what they say that they do, or are going to be the right fit for a particular role. So maybe getting more into that of like, how do you actually steer yourself to figure out what you are? Because I know for me, like, I really need that, like, that psychological safety. I need to trust the people that I'm working with to be able to get to that, like, alpha waves of creativity. And when I'm not there, I'm not effective. I'm not that good. And so for me, it's really, really important to figure that out. And I think there's probably other people that are like that, or that we're leaving completely out of the industry. Because I mean, for a lot of my career, I was like scared, felt like I didn't belong. And a lot of it was just like people trying to make us competitive and make us the best that we could be. But I don't think it really worked. And I would like to change that so that other people don't have to experience that.
So how have you experienced that in your career? We often hear it referred to as impostor syndrome.
Look, I think what Heather is referring to is something that's very, very close to me. The way I describe it is that diversity trumps ability. Everybody is trying to come across as the expert or the world best at X or Y. But in my experience, if you are building something that is genuinely innovative, or a creative lead that has a creative lead, more often than not is a result of this interaction that Heather is describing. It's almost like good strategy is the product of a network rather than a product of a single network, which is a single person and their own head, as it were. So I think we've been brought up to be good strategists, but I totally agree with Heather that certainly in my experience, some of the best things that we've worked on in the last 5 years, in which Heather was involved as well, came as a result of actually creating this dynamic of appreciating that the diversity of the group might actually be better than just assigning a single individual to do the strategy, if that makes sense. Yeah. Which is really bad news if you want to become a strategist and have it in your job title. But yeah, I guess part of the magic is actually learning how to get the most out of ideas and people and the people around you. So fundamental to any future strategy roles is going to be this ability to pull that intelligence and insight from those around you, not just from yourself.
Heather, we do have some Americans amongst our live audience.
You're letting Americans into Europe.
We are.
Okay.
And we've got a question from Ali from the great city of Atlanta in Georgia. And here's the question. As a student, your book struck a chord with me. What do you recommend to students who want to get a depth of information and exposure in a limited amount of time before diving into a full-time career commitment? That's a very good question. What would you say to that?
I think we have to follow our own motivations, because when you're looking for something that will be fast, like when you are working with your own intrinsic motivations, then you will stay motivated and stay learning. So follow your instincts, follow what you're interested in. What is it about this world, this discipline, this field that you find interesting, and then go and learn everything that you can. Stay connected to people and listening to what courses they're taking. I've heard the Goodby Silverstein Masterclass, haven't taken it yet. I think I'm going to take that pretty soon. Stuff like that, where it's somebody who's put some effort to distill their thinking into a book or a course.
Thank you. Rihanna, you'd like to ask Heather a question about taking some time off.
Yeah, so Heather, you mentioned that you were inspired by Stefan Sagmeister's TED Talk on the power of time off. So I wanted to ask you whether or how important you think it is for people working within the media advertising field to take substantial time off? And also, is there a perfect time to take that sort of time off? Is it, 10 years into your career, X amount of years into your career? What do you think?
What do I think? So, I mean, I'm in the middle of being in massage school. I'm a year into, so I'm doing it again, essentially, of like going deep on something away from this world. But I think you have to follow your instincts and figure out what's right for you. What do you need to feel good and have the knowledge and the people supporting you that you need? Maybe other people don't feel like they need this. Like, I know folks, like, I'm from Texas. I know people who live, within a few hundred miles of where they went to high school, and they're happy with their life. I would not be happy with that life. So I had to go and see what else was out there. I think I was really inspired by Stefan Sagmeister's talk. And also, like, I went and I did a trip to Peru when I had maybe 3 or 4 years of experience. And I was there for 2 weeks. I studied Spanish. I hiked to Machu Picchu. And I saw other retired people there, in their 70s with their, little bag taking pictures and stuff. And I just felt like I was so glad that I went there when I was in my 20s rather than waiting till the end of my life. The next day is not promised. So if there's something that you feel in your heart you need to do, then do it. Let me be the push.
Rihanna, did you take any time off? Because your career started in the Midlands and then you moved down to London. We've worked together for a lot of years. Yours has been a very fast-paced career. Have you ever taken time off? And is it on your mind, or have you seen colleagues do it and seen them benefit from it?
I haven't taken time off. So I'm actually, I guess, 5 years into my career. I've always worked media agency side. And as Lee said, I started off in Birmingham and moved down to London 2 years ago to continue that. But I would say it's definitely crossed my mind in terms of, having that sort of career break, if you like, or time away, whether it is just traveling and just taking time to kind of rejuvenate yourself and become inspired in other ways. So it's definitely on my mind, but I think timing is always that critical factor, and when is the right time, and you start to progress in your career in a certain way and you wonder, oh, is now the right time, or should I continue a bit more? So I think that's kind of the difficult decision, really. But yes, Lee, definitely something I would consider.
I think also the hubs of where this business is, biggest are some of the most expensive cities in the world. So if we don't play a little geo arbitrage and if we always are staying in New York or London, it's going to be really hard to do something like this. But yeah. You're welcome when the pandemic is over to come and stay with me if you'd like.
That's a nice offer, and that's on record now, Heather. It makes me think of Brian's point earlier about his mentor saying actually the most creative thing you can do is get a cheap mortgage, because actually it's that reliance on paying the bills that keeps us in this cycle, isn't it?
That's a lot of what I hear is people who have monthly burn rates that they have to have that $250,000 or better job in the US, and then they're starting, moral flexibility starts to come in and they're not living aligned with their values.
Okay, Kevin, the penultimate question of this session of Book Club is coming from you, and it's a question about the virtual future.
Yeah, it's quite the penultimate question. One of the premises, or actually two of the premises of your whole approach to this book, Heather, were that there was value in learning and that was important. And that the sort of learning that was done, and you mentioned earlier that marketing isn't a profession, it's more akin to a trade, is sort of absorbed almost osmotically by being in physical proximity to those people that you're looking to learn from. As we move towards, perhaps accelerated by the current crisis we're going through, and a lot of people looking at the cost of office space and the necessity to have people housed in expensive city centre locations. As we move towards a kind of more virtual future and a more distributed workforce, how will this industry and perhaps many other industries manage to train its people effectively if we're not going to be having people spending extensive amounts of time physically with one another?
I think we might see a return to the offsite, like, because there's a lot you can do in a long weekend together. And maybe those are some of the better experiences that I've had before doing this book. So, or like just building on to, if the only time we're going to come together is the big meeting or the workshop or something, like, use that time wisely. One of the companies that I work with now, Nick Strada, started the Venturous. And every time we come together with a client, we have a campfire. And it's that belief that if you can break bread, eat something, and be around a fire, it does change the dynamics. And it's been really interesting for me to see that that is very true. So I hope that maybe we'll look to some of these other ways of how do humans connect and bring those in. What do you think?
Well, do you think if you were redoing the book that you could do it as effectively, having 2 or 3 breakout sessions or offsites with the people that you spent time with, as opposed to going and living with them? Because I don't know what the experience was for other people, but for the 3 or 4 weeks or however long it was that you were with us, we were kind of hand in hand through the day. We kind of got up and we had breakfast together. We walked to the office together. We spent time in the office together. We went off to meetings together. And it was there was a perpetual, and I think that if you'd said, I want to do 2 or 3 sessions with you, finding out what Sticks is all about, it would have been much more orchestrated. Whereas actually what you witnessed was the warts and all experience of what we were about. And that was reflected in the way that you encapsulated that, certainly in the chapter that you wrote about us, which I can say is very sort of true to what we are. And I don't know whether you would have actually got that if you'd done it in a much more structured fashion.
I agree with that, but I think you're asking 2 questions, because one is the future of work, right? And the other is how did I do the book? So the current workplace is really, like we were talking about, superficial. Like, I don't know any of my previous bosses as deeply as I know the 3 of you guys. Any of them. They do not care about me the way that you do. So anything that we can do to get to that place, to get closer to that place, is going to be better. So right now there's nothing. It's like we're supposed to, by playing kickball together occasionally and coming to a Christmas party together, we're supposed to be the best of friends. So something in between there, I think, like this offsite idea and doing something that's hard together, that could be like a physical thing. I think I've talked about this before. I feel like this job asked me to use my body to carry my brain around. I think we need our bodies. I think we need to be athletes practically. And that is something that I learned, like the 3 of you, I walked with. You guys are all big walkers, or, Brian's a cycling maniac, but like that was something of experiencing, like, if it is not embedded into your day, you will not do it, and you will, not be, your body is important. Your body is important. And I don't want to die at 49. So, so I think that that's what it all comes back to, is like, we give so much of ourselves to work, and but it's a narrow part, and there's more to us. And like, let's just be honest about that and be humane.
Thanks, Heather. Jess, our final question from Heather comes from you, and you've got a question about those softer skills, as you're calling them.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say humane, because I think we've touched on it as well a little bit with the importance of neurodiversity. But in Rob's chapter, he mentions that he, don't mistake his humour for not being professional. And it's something that really resonated with me, being sort of full-time weirdo and part-time strategist myself. So, and obviously you've mentioned as well that you are highly sensitive. In the book, you mentioned that you're trusting as well. So what kind of those traits would you believe that make a modern day 21st century 2020 strategist and leader?
So I think a lot of people can be strategists, and it's more about being okay with who you are and not, we're always living up to these external expectations rather than, is this internally what I want to be doing? And that's where I think that I would shift the, coming to a job, coming into work and thinking like I have to be perfect, I have to be the best, and believing that those people around you hold that expectation, rather than you setting the expectations, you setting the boundaries for what is acceptable and not acceptable. And even using the word weirdo, like I can see that you feel separate from people, and like as long as that's the case, we're not going to be able to be as effective, any of us, in any role that we're in. So I don't know if you feel comfortable talking to the people that you work with and being honest and being like, I don't feel like we're that close. I feel like a weirdo. What would that conversation be like? I can have that conversation with Kevin, Brian, and Sahar. I don't know that I can have that with everybody else that I've ever worked with. And so, my career has significantly shifted since I started just working with people that I trust.
Does that resonate with you, Jess?
Yeah, massively. I think trust is so important. It goes so much deeper than just, working with people every day. It's about embedding yourselves in cultures and different lives and having that diversity being around us all the time. And being honest and sharing our views, especially now that it's sort of, in this time, it is a bit of a leveler, I suppose. So it's probably a good time to have that conversation.
And Jess, do you feel, as a woman working in our industry, that those softer skills are sometimes, as you've said before, interpreted as a potential weakness?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of things like empathy and curiosity, those type of things, they're not, they could be the opposite of what are traditionally seen as harder skills or more professional skills, in quotes there as well. So it's about treading that line between bringing that playful, good humor, kind of empathetic nature as a woman and a young woman in the industry as well, and really seeing that as more of a strength than a weakness, and really sort of bringing that to the table. And that is definitely what I try and bring in my role.
Do you agree with that, Heather?
I do, and I sense like a little bit, you might be a highly sensitive person too, so I'd recommend looking into that, take the quiz, and if it is true, like remember that the world was designed for the 80% of people who do not take this much stimulus in, and not for us, and that might help you. It's helped me.
Thank you.
Heather LeFevre, thank you so much for being our guest on Book Club this month and for talking about brain surfing. And thanks, of course, to all the readers who took part today. If you'd like to join us on one of these recordings, please do get in touch via our website.